Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss why people are saying that the budget statement given by Jeremy Hunt today is a sign that a May general election is looking more likely. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, as many of you will know, I've been minded to think a May general election to be the most likely. Now, that's not to say I'm going, oh yeah, I'm 80% sure of this. I'm not overwhelmingly confident about it, because there are multiple times when the election could reasonably be held. It's just that I've thought for some time May is more likely than any other time. And although journalists keep talking about autumn, two recent events have, if anything, made a May election more likely, including the budget statement today. The first event was actually last week, as the far right of the Tory party, as far as they're concerned, Rishi Sunak is now at war with them. Open war. Now, it's hard to argue that they're wrong. He has downgraded his focus on culture wars, particularly the Rwanda plan. He hasn't dropped those policies, but it's fair to say they don't have his full attention now, or the full attention of his new cabinet. And then the second was the budget today. It was a typical Tory pre-election budget. Lots of nice sounding tax cuts to bribe the voters who keep forgetting that every time the Tories win the election, those taxes go right back up again straight away. But that isn't what makes a May election more likely, because after all, this budget statement doesn't actually do anything. It's just preparation for the main budget in March, and that is definitely the pre-election budget, no matter when the election is. The reason why the announcements today mean May is more likely is because of what the Tories are trying to do. They are attempting to give the impression that, as is always the case, oh, there's been tough times. I know you've all been through a great deal. I'm very sorry about that. But our superb work means that the good times can roll again. Rejoice, rejoice. Oh, but don't vote for Labour or it'll go away. Absolute classic Tory trick, and it often works. So it's not to be easily dismissed. It works on a lot of people. And it will work on a lot of people even after 14 years. But the details of this budget are not going to make people feel better off. It's a budget that gives voters £5 and steals £10 from them. The Office for Budgetary Responsibility has downgraded its growth forecast for next year. Partly ironically because growth is looking better this year than expected. It doesn't feel like it, but apparently it is. They've also said that the 2% inflation target will not be met until 2025. That's too late for the election. The Tories will enjoy the fact that this year is forecast to be a growth year. They'll make a lot of that. Although, like I said, you struggle to try and convince ordinary people. It feels like it. But the problem with having higher than expected growth this year is it just makes the figures next year worse. Because all growth is, if you like, look at, because the OBR is saying 0.6% growth, it looks like what we're going to have this year. All that means is that our economy is 0.6% bigger than it was last year. So it's just compared to the previous year. So if this year is better than expected, it makes next year, the election year, comparatively worse. So you make a rod for your own back. The longer you leave the election, the more obvious this becomes in negative economy headlines. And it all adds up to both the data and the feelings regarding the economy being worse next year. The measures in this budget are not actually going to ease the cost of living for ordinary voters, even swing voters. They're just intended to sound like they were. Oh, they're going to cut our taxes. Well, that means more money in our pockets. That's what it's intended to sound like. That's not what's going to happen, though. And the thing about a budget that sounds better than it is you don't want to give the electorate time to realise it. The main budget will be delivered in March with the measures implemented in April. Now, if Sunak has a Halloween election, then voters will have had to live with this budget, the reality of this budget, not the promise, the reality, for almost 7 months. Long enough to realise it's not actually helping them, especially as the cost of living bites hard again as winter draws in. Time enough for Labour to show just how much money it's making for the already wealthy, though, the millionaires. The OBR are also predicting that house prices will be falling in 2024. Double trouble for homeowners, the lifeblood of the Tory vote. Not only are their mortgage payments going up a lot as their fixed rate terms end, that's already been happening and is going to carry on happening every month, but the value of their house is going to go down in election year. So paying more for a less valuable commodity, that's not a great place for the Tories to be with their main voting demographic. Again, the longer the Tories leave the election, the more of those home-owning voters will see this, because with each passing month, another load of mortgage holders ends their fixed rate and goes, how much is it going to cost me? And the longer they leave the election, with each passing month, you get closer to that point where people are realising actually the value of their house is lower. The budget in general got a pretty bad report from the Institute for Fiscal Studies as well. They described it as harming the long-term growth prospects for the UK. This is because, despite appearances, it's an austerity budget. It's cutting spending. It's cutting investment. The IFS said there's no measures in here which will promote growth. Of course not. This is a budget which intends to limit the damage to the Tories in the election, but understands that Labour are still going to win that election. It's a budget designed to hurt the UK so badly that Labour will struggle to turn it around for the following election. The tax cuts are also a win-win for the Tories, right? Because they work in conning some people to vote for them. So it potentially reduces the scale of the loss. They really don't want to end up with just 100 seats. Because people really don't pay attention. They will simply not realise that the Tories are lying and that they will put them back up again after the election, like they always do. But it's not just a win electorally. It's a second win as well, because when Labour comes to power, it creates a massive problem for them. Being realistic, the economy is in a massive hole. It's not growing. It's not really growing. Like you might say, 0.6 growth, 0.6% growth. Yeah, it's not growing. There's not, like the IFS have said, there's nothing in the budget to make it grow. You need investment. You've got to spend. Labour cannot get away with a stagnant economy, and nor would they want to try. To invest, they need money. Now, Labour keeps saying things like, we can't just spend our way to growth. No, but you do need that money. You do need that investment, and they have plans for that investment. The money cannot come from just sitting back for a couple of years and waiting for the economy to grow to the point where they have it. That growth's not going to be achieved without that investment, as the IFS have identified. So it needs a combination of taxation and borrowing. Now, Labour have to be very careful with borrowing. Never mind the massive debt pile that the Tories created and the media just go, what debt pile? Oh, no, we haven't seen one. You know, they get away with it. Labour will not get away with it. So, in fact, I did a video yesterday pointing out the fact that Rishi Sunak is making a big deal of Labour's tens of billions of pounds of borrowing plan, which actually they don't have plans for that, but it might get to that. And yet he's borrowing hundreds of billions of pounds. So Labour, Labour do need to keep the borrowing down. They are not held to the same standards as the Tories. So then that means they need to lean more on taxation. But with the Tories lowering taxes a few weeks before a possible May election, it means Labour are stuck with the difficulty of, first of all, a year of lower tax receipts. And then the political problem of how they get that taxation back up without pissing off key voters. Yes, there should be more taxation of the very wealthy, you'll say. Absolutely. But it's not politically as simple as that, because if you bring in a taxation that's going to hit like millionaires or something, a lot of people just hear tax rises and think it applies to them when it doesn't. And the Tory media will make sure that people think it applies to them, because they'll describe any tax rise as in it's going to cost every household in Britain this. They do it every time. Even if it's like, no, it's not actually going to cost the typical household anything, because this is just for the wealthy, right? That's just how it'll work politically. So to recap, if Sunak tries to aim for, say, an autumn election, which I'm not saying won't happen, because I can see the conditions for it, it's just I'm sceptical. But if he tries, consider the following, right? First, people have time to notice that this budget doesn't actually help them. But with a May election, the budget's been in place for like a few weeks. People don't know what's going on. Second, the GDP figures look pretty bad next year. So leaving the election until you're over 80% way through the year and you've got lots of economic data seems unwise. Third, the situation for homeowners is going to look worse and worse as 2024 rumbles on. Fourth, if next summer has a good seafaring weather, then channel crossing numbers could rise. That's going to be trouble for Sunak. Fifth, there is already rebellion afoot. It's not coordinated yet, but the longer Sunak leaves the election, the higher the risk that it gets organised. Sixth, there's a reason elections tend to be in May. People tend to feel a lot better about things towards the end of spring than they do in autumn. Governments tend not to be well advised holding elections during the miserable months. Mind you, Sunak may not care about that last one if he has no intention of actually winning the election or hanging about after it. But there's more than enough reason to suppose May is much more likely than October, and this budget actually adds evidence for May rather than autumn. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.